Hello, my name is Mallory Jenna Robinson. Join me on A Hateful Homicide, a true crime podcast dedicated to telling the stories regarding the murders of transgender, gender non-binary, and gender diverse community members in the United States and abroad. This is A Hateful Homicide.
911, what's your emergency?
Yeah. A transgender woman has been shot and killed in North Baltimore. Alpha?
In the U.S., trans women of color have a life expectancy of just 35 years.
This happens on a daily. Another one of my friends got killed right up the street from here.
These cases are true. The victims are real, and their voices matter. This is A Hateful Homicide. The murder of Nina Surgutskaya. Call me Dr. Dahmer. Wednesday, April 10th, 2019, Kursk, Russia. Warning, the following episode you're about to listen to may contain audio evidence of misgendering. Listening discretion is advised.
Меня зовут Ксения, я трансгендерная женщина, живу в России, сейчас на данный момент в Питере, уже почти год. Да, действительно в России в этом плане пока очень тяжело. Я не знаю, как в глубинке, но даже в некоторых больших городах это не очень приветствуется, и в основном трансгендерные люди вынуждены скрываться, прятаться. И Viewpoint очень классная организация. Честно говоря, я за ней тоже очень давно следила через интернет, и когда я была в Москве, я поняла, что для моего дальнейшего, так скажем, развития своего образа и вообще своей жизни, что эта организация очень сильно сможет мне помочь в продвижении себя. Но Viewpoint дал мне первую услугу, которую я у них купила, это было обучение макияжу. То есть научиться наносить макияж, краситься и все остальное, там, скрывать какие-то недостатки. Она, именно вот как раз Viewpoint, придал мне эту уверенность в себе. И, насколько я знаю, в России, по-моему, это единственная студия, которая занимается гендерными перевоплощениями и работает трансгендерными людьми, как я, или как вообще трансгендеров не очень приветствую. И чревато всякими последствиями нехорошими. Поэтому, насколько я знаю, познакомившись даже в интернете, что некоторые трансгендеры просто вынуждены сидеть дома на шее у родителей, потому что устроиться на работу они не могут, и выхода из положения они просто не видят. Жалко, конечно, но когда в этом плане Россия все-таки начнет как-то помогать трансгендерным людям, не знаю. И что делать, не знаю.
It's Wednesday, April 10th, 2019, in the city of Kursk, Russia. It would be the home where 25-year-old trans-Eastern European female Nina Surgutskaya resided. And when she went missing, her mother, Irina, reported her daughter missing the following day, stating that the last time she had seen or spoken to her daughter, she was with her partner, 27-year-old cisgender trans-Eastern European males, Dr. Mikhail Turganov. Welcome, my audience. Thank you all so much for tuning in to Season 4, Episode 6 of A Hateful Homicide. And this episode is called Me, Dr. Dahmer. This case really garnered a lot of attention around Nina's horrible and hateful homicide that occurred that Wednesday night. She was with her partner, a doctor. He had met her 6 months prior, and the two seemed to connect. What you could hear in the initial audio evidence was from Pink News. It was actually an interview with Nina back in the summer of 2018, just 9 months before her hateful homicide. And and prior to this, it was 3 months before she had actually met Dr. Mikhail Toganov. She talked about in this, what you could hear was her hopes and dreams for her future at that time at the age of 24. And she talked about this idea of being able to be herself and have a better life. Nina talked about the hardships that plagued the Russian community as a whole, but then also those of trans identities. You could hear her emotional plea for help and support. And she's not the only one, my audience. As we go through today's case, we're going to hear from Z, another incredible trans woman who, talks about her own experiences over there in Eastern Europe, specifically Russia, and then also her experience in the Ukraine. We're also going to hear from an incredible little clip from RuPaul's Drag Race, where the incredible performer Peppermint discusses her time in Russia and the phobia that was over there. And then we'll also hear from Raven Noah, her incredible commentary as usual. We also was able to get an interview with an ex-boyfriend of Nina's by the name of Jonathan Henley. And he was an American cisgendered male, and he had lived over in Russia. And so he's a little bit more like vague in his answers, but you can hear just a little brief snippet of an interview that we were able to get with him a couple of weeks ago. And so I'm finally was able to get that and able to now share this episode with you. So without further ado, we'll get into this case and again discuss the hateful homicide of Nina Surgutskaya. It all began around Wednesday night on April 10th of 2019. 25-year-old Nina Surgutskaya, a cosmetologist and aspiring lawyer, was dating. She was in the midst of her love story, like so many of us, and her partner, 27-year-old Dr. Mikhail Toganov, had went out for a night of drinking and dancing. She had just received her cosmetology license, and so they were celebrating that Wednesday night. The two had went back to her flat in Kursk, Russia, an area that is north, not too far from Moscow, but like the northern eastern portion. It's a little bit more rural, but they do have a, somewhat of a bustling nightlife. And so Nina and Mikhail decided to go out to celebrate her recent degree and certificate in cosmetology. What should have been an ordinary night for the pair turned into a night of bloodshed and turned into a house of horrors. They go back to Nina's home, and what happens is that they have some more drinks, a nightcap, and begin to engage in sexual activity. According to her partner, as they were engaging in intercourse, Nina, who at this point was also a post-operative, meaning that she had undergone gender-affirming surgery, and we had heard a similar case with remember in our season 3 episode 1 with Diane Delia, and she too was a post-operative trans woman. So Nina in this case also identified as a post-operative trans woman, and they were in the middle of having intercourse when I guess him being a doctor was able to decipher. Now again, the two had been together for 6 months, and according to him, this was the first time that they were about to be passionate. So once he discovered this, he reacted in a way that even shook the detectives. But before all of that was even revealed, first we have to go back to what happened when Nina first disappeared. Why all of this is happening. Nina's mother, Irina Surgutskaya, becomes concerned about the fact that her daughter, who she talks to very frequently, all of a sudden, abruptly, around 11 p.m. on that Wednesday night, April 10th of 2019, stopped communicating. Initially, when she went to go report her daughter missing on that Thursday, April 11th of 2019, Detective Nikolai Trevesky was on the scene, and he took Irina's statement. And one of the things that he was concerned about was the fact that it wasn't, just several hours, or it was just, a few hours after Irina was unable to get a hold of her daughter. So he wasn't initially concerned. He felt that it should be at least 24 hours. However, Nina's mother stated that because she had just recently received her certificate of completion in cosmetology, and the fact that she was supposed to celebrate with her daughter the following day, that they were still making plans. And so they were in the middle of making plans when she just abruptly stopped texting her mother back, which was unlike her, Irina stated. And so this calls for her to then reach out to Nina's partner, Dr. Mikhail Toganov, and he stated that he and Nina had came back home from a night of celebrating her recent great news, and when he woke up, that he had not seen Nina and he doesn't know where she went, that he then left her flat and returned to his own residence. So when she went and, of course, was discussing this with Detective Nikolai Trevesky, he was taking all of this down, and of course he knew that the first place to start would be her partner, since that's who she was staying with, and that was the last person that she was just in communication with. He goes there to Dr. Mikhail Toganov's home and decides to do just a kind of sit down, not official interrogation with him. Dr. Mikhail Toganov mentioned that he was getting ready to go to the hospital, the general hospital, and perform a surgery, so he didn't have much time to speak with Detective Trevesky. Detective Trevesky asks the same questions that Nina's mom did, and again, Dr. Mikhail Toganov gave the same response, that when he woke up this morning, Thursday morning of April 11, 2019, that he had not seen Nina and he had no idea where she went. So again, Detective Trevesky makes a note of this, but as he's making a note of Dr. Mikhail Toganov's statement, he sees some scratches on his face, deep scratches along his earlobe and the side of his neck and the nape area. Detective Trevesky asks Dr. Toganov, where did those scratches come from? He states that he and Nina had engaged in intercourse, and as a result of some rough housing, Nina scratched him, innocent enough. But Detective Trevesky noted that the scratches were very, very deep, almost to the point that they were almost flesh opening. Because he was now becoming concerned that the good doctor could be responsible for something much more than just a date night gone wrong, he asked if he could have his forensic team come to the hospital, since Dr. Toganov had to get to the general hospital to perform surgery, that if his team could come to the hospital and collect the sample of the scratches, do like a sort of DNA swabbing. With reluctance, Mikhail agreed and stated that that would be fine. Detective Trevesky then goes to Nina's apartment, and this is located again over in the eastern Kursk area. Again, slightly rural. It's about 5 miles from certain parts of town, certain things like the gas station or even a good little nightlife. And it was a typical 5-mile drive or so to or from Nina's place, especially if she wanted to go out and have a good time, just like she did that night with her partner, that Wednesday night to be exact. So he goes into her apartment with his forensic team, and they're investigating. Initially, Nina's apartment looked spotless. Her mother, Irina, and her father, Holden, they all came there. And one of the things that they were concerned to was they wanted to see if their daughter was inside of the apartment, harmed, maybe in distress. Detective Trevesky encouraged him to stay outside. And again, as they were inspecting inside of Nina's apartment, what looked to be like a clean place, because Nina definitely was described as a neat freak. That was kind of her nickname, as her ex-boyfriend, Jonathan, fondly mentions. And as they're investigating, they did start to see specks of blood and more blood. especially in Nina's bedroom. So immediately they realized that this was a crime scene. Fingerprints are taken, swabs, and they realized that on Nina's bed that there's a pillow, and there's a pillow with makeup on it. And typically Nina, again, who's known as a neat freak, who would, after a night out, would remove her makeup. Detective Trebesky and then forensics team thought that this was something worth collecting. Could this pillow be a potential murder weapon? They weren't sure, but they decided to collect the evidence anyway. As they're going through, they continue to realize that there's much more evidence, even within Nina's kitchen. They look inside of the garbage disposal, and they discover pieces of human flesh. And they weren't sure exactly whose flesh it was, and so they had to collect it and take it in for forensics. As they're doing that, Detective Trebesky is preparing himself to having to potentially give Holden and Irina devastating news that they weren't prepared for. A Thursday that was supposed to be a day of celebration. They're celebrating with their daughter the congratulatory news of her receiving her cosmetology degree after years of adversity and hardships and love and acceptance, to all be snuffed out just 2 days after receiving her certificate blindsided her family. He didn't quite want to go there yet, even though her mother was already becoming that motherly instinct that her daughter was no longer here. But she didn't want to go there just yet. As they're standing outside, other members of Nina's family arrive. Her brother, 2 of her brothers exact, as well as her younger sister. They all huddle together, the Surgutskaya family, clinging to figuring out exactly where is Nina and what happened. And if so, did Mikhail have anything to do with it? The forensics team goes back up to the hospital. At this point, Mikhail has now finished his surgery. They swipe his neck as well as the bottom of his earlobe and take it in for DNA collection along with the pillow and other things, as well as the flesh inside of the garbage disposal. All of these things are going on. And then Detective Trebesky encourages the Surgutavias to please come down to the Kursk Police Department. They all get down there, and he tells Irina and Holden that they've made a discovery of some blood. He doesn't mention the flesh, as he knows that that's too graphic and it could cause them to go into shock. He just mentions that there's blood and asked about the makeup on Nina's pillow, asking if she was someone who would keep makeup on her face or if she was someone who would remove it. Irina insisted that her daughter would always remove the makeup from her face, confirming Detective Trebesky's suspicions, and again confirming that the forensics team needed to collect that pillow. Then, as the other forensics team is collecting Dr. Mikhail Torgunov's DNA, Detective Trebesky encourages Sibel Homasky to come in and also bring in Dr. Mikhail Torgunov into the Kursk Police Department. So now what we're having is Nina's family in one interrogation room with Detective Trebesky, and now Dr. Mikhail Torgunov been brought down after his surgery has been completed to be interviewed by Detective Sibel Inaskovi. The interview seems to go a little well. She kind of has this good cop vibe, and Detective Nikolai Trebesky has more of like a kind of tough, harsher tone. And as he has the Surgutavias just kind of wait in the interrogation room, of course, there's the potentiality of having to also go to the morgue and even identify some remains, some certain body parts that were still there, that were being started to be collected as he was getting information from his forensics team who were still inside of the apartment. He had stepped outside before entering the other interrogation room to meet with Detective Inganaski and received news that Nina's head had been discovered attached to her spine. It was confirmed that Nina Surgutskaya had met a hateful homicide, that this Dr. Dahmer, who will mention that he was a huge fan of Jeffrey Dahmer, the American serial killer who targeted Black and brown cisgendered queer men back in the late 80s and early 90s, that this good doctor was inspired by Jeffrey Dahmer, that he always wanted to live out this sort of Dahmer dynasty, this fantasy of sorts. And when he discovered Nina's gender identity, this was the ultimate opportunity. So Detective Trubisky goes in there and he hammers in hard as the bad cop with all of the evidence. Again, they have not made the Surgutskayas aware of what's going on. There is going to be a liaison that comes in to provide a sort of family guidance on on these situations of dismemberment, disembowelment, decapitation, because this is such a heinous case of what the good doctor did. It required a little bit more of a special attention, more than what Detective Trubisky could provide. And so a liaison was being notified to come in, as they were going to have to let the Surgutskaya know that their daughter and sister would no longer be returning. They're hammering him for exactly what happened in the other interrogation room. Being faced with all of the evidence, and he's a doctor, he knows the science, he knows the DNA is gonna be what it is. He freely confesses that he murdered his girlfriend. He stated that, as I stated earlier, that the two had came back from a night out on that Wednesday, April 10th of 2018. They had came back from the pub, driven 5 miles back to Nina's flat in Kursk, Russia. The two had a nightcap, some gin and some rum, some Russian whiskey, and began to engage in a passionate night of lovemaking. He had discovered that Nina was post-operative. Being a doctor, he was able to notice the sutures and the healing marks. Commented. Nina opened up a little bit more about her post-operative journey. He stated, as she was telling him what was going on regarding her gender journey and her post-operative health care, he took the pillow and smothered her. She wasn't dead, but she was unconscious. He then throws the pillow off of the bed and then begins to strangle her. That is when she loses her life. Now, left with Nina's body on her bed, he realizes that he can now enact his fantasy. Again, that Dahmer fantasy. He grabs some knives out of the kitchen, goes back, and begins to dismember Nina. As he dismembers Nina, he realizes that he has a hunger for flesh. Again, one thing about the American serial killer, Jeffrey Dahmer, he was known to be a cannibal. And this is someone who, after committing a murder, will typically decide to eat their victim as a sort of token and memento. Well, Dr. Mikhail Tokanov decided that he wanted a token and memento. And he decided, as he was dismembering his girlfriend of 6 months, to then cook her flesh in her own kitchen, using her own pots and pans. He cooks her, he uses salt to add a little flavor, as he would state to Detective Trubisky. And then whatever he decided not to consume, he put inside of the garbage disposal, that human flesh that they collected earlier, that Thursday, April 11th. All of this started to make sense, and it was official that the good doctor, Dr. Mikhail Tokanov, had committed a hateful homicide. This called me Dr. Dahmer, all because his girlfriend, who had so bravely and boldly decided to live her truth and be proud in herself and undergo gender-affirming surgery, and she was ready to share that part of herself with her partner, someone she thought she could trust. And unfortunately, he took that news and catalyzed it as his motivation to live out a fantasy of murder, dismemberment, and cannibalism. And of course, as all of this is going on, there's going to be a liaison notified. But I want to take a moment, my audience, and hear from another incredible community member out there in Russia. She had a dual experience, one in Russia, specifically the city of Kyiv, and then also in this country of Ukraine. Her name is S04, and you're going to hear about just the war that's going on over there, as we know, between Russia and Ukraine, and her own current experience.
Sometimes we think it's just all a dream, that we stuck inside some kind of a video game, because you just you live in a quiet society, and then you hear bombings, and then you wake up to the sound of bombings. I don't want to go outside. I'm literally scared for my life. All my friends left the city. My neighbors left my floor, and I think my building. This is not a very rainbow-friendly place. So lives for trans people are very bleak here. If you have male gender in your passport, they will not let you go abroad. They will not let you through. A war within a war, truly, truly. Every noise from outside is a warning sign. It was hell living as a trans person in Kiev, in Ukraine. We feel invisible. Truly. Like we're not people, like we're not human. It's truly how we feel.
And what you can hear, my audience, is S04, again, this incredible, beautiful 30-year-old trans Russian European woman living over there, struggling to survive in this war-torn times. This was from CBS News back on March 1st of 2022, reaching over 20,000 views. If there's anything that you can do to support, please do so. Again, S04 sharing her story. Now, as we go back to the hateful homicide of Nina Surgutskaya, Detective Trovetsky notified Tatiana Kryskoki to notify the Surgutskaya family of the hateful homicide. He also notes that he's going to be in there in just a moment to also let her father know specifically first. Again, this is Russia, so it's a little bit more masculine society. So he's going to let her father know the heinous and hateful details first, and then it will be up to him to notify Irina, her mom. So Tatiana goes in and she lets them know that Nina has passed away. Holden and Irina are devastated. Her brothers, her sister, all of them are completely blindsided. The family was supposed to get together this Thursday to celebrate the good news that Nina had just graduated from cosmetology school. This family celebration now turned to a family of grieving the life of this beautiful 25-year-old trans Eastern European woman who was just trying to live her life, a best life, a better life than she had. Well, Detective Trovetsky enters the interrogation room where the Surgutskayas are now processing the fact that Nina is deceased, but then also learning the fact that her partner, a man that they had met and approved, had committed this hateful homicide. Detective Trovetsky asks Mr. Surgutskaya if he would step outside. He agrees. The two speak, and he notifies him that his daughter had been met not only with just a murder, but she had also been dismembered and also eaten. Mr. Surgutskaya is completely devastated, but he keeps his composure. Detective Trovetsky notifies him that if he wants to let Irina know, it's up to him. He agrees he will let his wife know, as that she would not have it any other way, quote unquote. Nina, fun fact, was actually named after her mom, Irina Nina Surgutskaya. She loved her mother very much so that she decided to take her mother's middle name as her first name. born in 1994 to Holden and Irina Nina Surgutskaya. Nina was the third of 4 children. Her older brothers, Hans and Manu, were incredibly proud of their sister, and her younger sister, Katia, was very fond of her as well. They would describe each other as sisters who were closer than ever. Nina's aunt, Mohufia, also discussed the fact that she was very fond of her niece. This is Irina's sister. They talked about outings where Nina and Katia and their mom and their aunt would all go out and have like a girls' day out, and they would love to do like little brunches. Even though Nina had a supportive and loving family, she did go through rough times. Coming out as a trans youth, I know that all too well, coming out as a trans youth can be very tough, especially in an Eastern European country, and Kursk, Russia was no exception. She was met with adversity in middle school and high school. Nina admitted that oftentimes she would have to appear as male just to appease her teachers. Her parents, who were always supportive of her journey but wanted to keep her safe, urged her to just hold on and try to present as male as possible, as masculine as possible for her own safety. And Nina complied for a few years. But again, around 2010, just a few years, 9 years to be exact, before her hateful homicide, she was determined to just be in her truth. And for the next 9 years, as a youth going all the way into her early 20s, she was thriving. She overcame that adversity in middle school and high school. And in her early 20s, she had struggled a little bit with figuring out what she wanted to do. She had worked as a hostess at a bar, and she had also loved doing makeup, and that was one of the things that she was known for as well, was her incredible makeup skills, and also the love of hair. She wasn't sure if she wanted to make that into a profession. She even thought about going to law school. She talked about that as she was a member of the debate team in her high school. And when she graduated as the member of class of 2012, she was proud of her journey as a trans youth and into a trans woman. She had dated on and off. She dated a guy, an American cisgender male, age 30, by the name of Jonathan. The two had met. He moved over to Russia to pursue a career in law, and that's how they connected. And we'll hear from him in a little bit in his love story with Nina. Though it was short-lived, the two stayed close as friends. Nina then would get into a relationship in October of 2018, just 6 months before her hateful homicide, that with Dr. Mikhail Toganov. The two had met on a dating app, and Nina initially on her dating app profile did not disclose that she was trans, but she did disclose to Dr. Mikhail Toganov. Her father, Holden, said that when Nina brought him home to introduce the family, that they had talked about if Dr. Mikhail Toganov knew her gender identity, and Nina insisted that he did. Her father also mentioned, as they were all processing this news as well, that he too actually spoke with Dr. Mikhail Toganov and regarding his daughter's gender identity, and was wanting to be confirmed that the good doctor knew the news. He said he knew, and he was fine with it and loved his daughter regardless. So this idea of this, as we know all too well, trans panic defense, was beginning to become insulting. The motivation for the hateful homicide for Nina, according to her partner, was the fact that she did not disclose that she was post-operative. Again, post-operative means that this is an individual who has undergone gender-affirming surgery. There are many types of gender-affirming surgeries in the trans community, but specifically for a trans-identified woman, she would undergo vaginoplasty. This is when multiple modes. You can either go through the penile inversion, or you can also go through the colonic route. Well, Nina went through the colonic route, and Dr. Mikhail, who had also had a specialty in trans surgeries, knew this. Nina, who had admitted to her mother, Irina, that she wasn't ready to engage in sex, as she was saving herself for her person, quote unquote. And at this point, 6 months in, by April of 2018, the two had spent the Christmas holidays of 2018 together, New Year's of 2019, even went to Ireland for St. Patrick's Day before returning back. She felt that Dr. Mikhail Tokanov was her person, and she was ready to be with him completely. And that's exactly what was happening on the night of Wednesday, April 10th of 2019, when the two had came back from a night of dancing and celebrating her recent cosmetology certificate. When all of a sudden, in the middle of making love, he snaps, smothers her to a point of unconsciousness, strangles her with his bare hands, takes those bare hands and goes to her kitchen, grabs some butchery utensils, uses shock force trauma, and then not only dismember her, disembowel her, but then he also eats her and says he did this because he loves Jeffrey Dahmer. As we continue to go through this case, my audience, I want to take a moment and also give you an idea of what some other community members in Russia go through, especially our trans community of all the different identities and expressions. As you can hear in the interview from Z, she talked about that how trans folks couldn't even travel outside of the Eastern European countries, especially if their license or passports did have male assigned at birth. One of the things that was mentioned as well was that if you wanted to have your gender marker changed in Russia, in the Ukraine, that you must undergo extensive psychiatric therapy. It's a little bit more lenient here in the United States, typically at least 6 months of therapy, and then you can get those legal documents changed. But in the continent of Russia, as well as the country, we have realized that there is a lot more work to be done, even all the way down to the community having access to drive.
Gender people have been banned from driving in Russia, according to a new legal amendment signed by Russian Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev in December, the Associated Press reports. The regulations, dated December 29th, affect people deemed to have sexual disorders, including fetishists, voyeurs, exhibitionists, and transvestites. They've been criticized by rights activists, who see them as unconstitutional and likely to intensify an already hostile climate for the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender community in Russia. Maria Bast, a transgender woman who lives in Moscow, says she will continue driving, even though she'll be violating the law.
I will show with my example that this resolution is a total violation of human rights. I have never been under psychoneurological supervision. There were no mental deviations registered. I am a capable human being.
The new regulations list numerous medical conditions that make someone ineligible for a driver's license, such as serious visual impairment or paralysis, and also includes mental and behavioral disorders as defined by the World Health Organization. The resolution does not claim WHO endorsement for the new driving restrictions. The World Health Organization's classification of mental and behavioral disorders includes gender identity disorders, such as transsexualism, and disorders of sexual preference, including fetishism and voyeurism. The organization is currently revising its international classification of diseases, and according to its website, the revised version is due in 2017.
So as you can hear, my audience, this is the trauma and drama that our community is facing over in Russia. They need our support now more than ever. They're ineligible to even seek safety. You could hear Z plea for support over in Kyiv, Ukraine. You can see that the community isn't even able to leave the country by flying out because their gender markers do not reflect their gender identities. They can't even drive to even get to the airport and then gonna be denied. These are the things that are impacting our trans community members. And if we can do our parts by just raising awareness, sharing this episode, then we're doing something. I also want to take a moment and hear from, of course, our incredible show has been a phenomenon, RuPaul's Drag Race. I love RuPaul and Ross Matthews. They're definitely dear and near to me. And one of their incredible contestants at the time, back in 2017, Peppermint, talks about her anti-LGBT experience. You may have seen Peppermint on the hit TLC show I Am Jazz, which talks about the life of Jazz Jennings, an incredible trans youth, and her journey into adulthood. Peppermint has been featured on there and is actually a good friend of Jazz Jennings' brother, Xander Jennings. So she talked about her own experience, and then fellow contestant Sasha Velour, who is of Russian ancestry, reflects on her own experience of not being able to be herself while living in Russia. Let's take a listen.
And then everybody laughs, and I look around and just start like laughing to blend in.
That was my experience when I first lived in Russia. Humor in another language is so challenging.
How long did you live there?
I lived there for like 2.5 years altogether.
Oh my God. I got stuck in Moscow. I was presenting female, and my ID does not match. And I was in Moscow airport for a connection. I think it was like 30 minutes. This was 8 months ago.
Oh my God.
And so we land, and we're supposed to go to the little transfer desk or whatever. And the woman, she didn't speak any English. And she just kept looking at my ID and looking at me. And it was clear that she was disagreeing with the fact that my ID looked male and I looked female.
Well, it's illegal in Russia.
Okay, so that's what it was. So she detained me.
That's really
I was terrified to the point where I had to snatch my own wig off my head in the line with all these people.
Oh my God.
Just to prove to her that this is me and please let me through. And it was so humiliating.
It's really a tragedy. There's a lot of gender fear in Russia.
Yeah.
I feel for her. When I was living in Russia, I had to disguise myself. I couldn't be Sasha Velour. I had to think carefully about what clothes I was wearing, how I moved my body. Queer people in Russia are living in an oppressive system.
I just have to keep in mind that it doesn't take away my womanhood.
Amen.
A woman.
And as you could hear, and Peppermint to this day, interesting. And, of course, when she was on RuPaul's Drag Race, she was competing for a drag competition. But since then, Peppermint boldly and proudly has continued to identify as a trans woman. And as you can hear, Sasha Velour add to that it is a very oppressive society. And even she had to present male. And again, that was the same concern that Nina's parents had for her when she first came out as a trans youth, and that was one of the reasons why they encouraged her to still be masculine expressive in Russia because of the oppressive society and for her safety. And of course, my audience, as we go back into the case, Tatiana is sitting down with Irina. Holden comes back into the interrogation room. He asks to be left alone with his wife. He sits her down and he shares the hateful news, the horrific news that their daughter's partner bestowed upon their daughter, their third or fourth child. He told Irina that Nina was strangled, that she was dismembered, and ultimately cannibalized. Irina couldn't bear anymore, shocked by the fact that her daughter was abruptly murdered. And now this news. She fainted and was rushed to the hospital. She ultimately was okay and was released the next day on Friday, April 12th of 2018. And then, of course, the liaison, Tatiana Yanoskany, came and provided more comfort and support. The family was left to identify what was left of Nina in the morgue in the city of Kursk. Her parents go and was left with a gruesome sight, my audience, that of only Nina's head attached to her spine. Shocked, horrified, speechless, they shook their heads, stating that this was their child, who they had just saw at a celebratory party when she walked across that stage, proudly in that cosmetology line for receiving her degree in hair and makeup. The aspiring law student who had undergone gender-affirming surgery in 2016, just 2.5 years before her hateful homicide. Now she was left in this way. I want to take a moment, my audience, and hear from Nina's former partner, Jonathan. He talks about the love that they shared, but he also really specifically gets more into just life with trans women in general. He really generalizes it, but I think you get an idea of just his whole approach. Let's take a listen.
Point where like it's not tangible to me, and like I always try to like bring any struggle into my speeches, but like I don't know anyone stronger than those in the trans community, if you ask me. Like a gay man and like a lesbian in this day and age, it's way more accepting, but like for someone who's trans, it's like we're in the 90s of like, you know, where people are not aware and not understanding of it. They really aren't. Like people are very, 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 very oblivious, especially when it comes to dating as well.
What, like for you, do you feel like that you would be open to dating a trans woman, like openly and publicly?
Oh, I have. 100% I have.
And what has that experience been like for you?
For me, it's funny because I feel like I'm above other people because I'm like, I don't have the insecurities of, like there's not much more I can go through of pain-wise. So for me, it's like, I have a confidence that is above others because I'm like, life's fucking short, motherfuckers. Like, if that's what you are into or that's what you, whatever it is, like, then you need to do what you need to do to make yourself happy. And like, you can't look on your peripheral of, oh, what is this person gonna think? What's that person gonna think? Because when you are trying, like we think, when people lie to people, they're lying because they don't want you to not like them. Or we don't want, you know, if I lie to you, I'm lying to you because I don't want you to not like me. What we don't realize is that that lie in that instance, you may not like me, but like it's going to come out eventually. So like the truth in all of it is that like you need to say how you feel and what you like and not worry about being liked. And that's what a lot of lies stem from. Like if I cheated on you, I'm worried that you're gonna be mad at me versus just telling the truth. And that, because the truth of the matter is that like it's reverse psychology. Like if I'm like, yeah, I cheated, that's gonna upset you. Versus if I didn't cheat, no, I'm lying. Well, I'm afraid you're not gonna like me because you're gonna get mad at me. But like one is way more catastrophic, if you ask me. Like you just, so that's why, like, you know, when you've gone through tragedy and seen it firsthand, like you need to, I just feel like sometimes that's my strength because I'm able to compartmentalize nonsense.
And as you can hear, my audience, that tragedy that he was mentioning was the tragedy of Nina's hateful homicide. He was completely devastated when Nina's younger sister, Katya, called him from Moscow and informed him that his former girlfriend was no longer here. And you could hear him talk about his own willingness to just be confident and be proud. And he encourages others to do the same. And you could hear how he just was very proud of who he is and also proud of the love he has for Nina. Oh, my audience. Dr. Mikhail Tokhanov was ultimately charged and arrested and charged with the hateful homicide of Nina Surgutskaya, facing a first-degree murder charge. He is scheduled to go to court in the beginning of 2023. I'm going to keep you all updated on the latest news. The Surgutskayas have since provided a memorial fund in Nina's name, and this memorial fund is in the hopes of being able to give community members who need gender-affirming surgeries financial access. So they're still doing incredible work in Nina's name. As we prepare to conclude this case, my audience, I wanted to have you hear from my incredible sister from another mister, Raven Noah. She poses two questions: how and why? I want you all to hear her own take on the hateful homicide of Nina Surgutskaya, this call me Dr. Dahmer, this doctor who was educated and successful and was well liked, and everyone was shocked, including his own parents. Never saw this coming. Let's hear her own take regarding the hateful homicide.
He was about to rob her. How do we not know? I've never heard of a man, but then again, this world is crazy with so many crazy people in it. I'm not even gonna speculate anything. But the one thing I can say is this beautiful woman is murdered. You got rid of the evidence. Her side of the story is gone. Meet hell. Your name should be straight from hell. You're 27 years old, and you killed her. We need to hear her side of the story, but you made sure we won't hear that. You could have been robbing her. She could have fought back. It was her house. It's not unknown to us for being robbed by people coming to our house. She could have fought you back. And you robbed her of her life. 25 years old. I always tell anybody, if you've had this surgery, this is the one thing I always be concerned about right here. This part. Let's sit in this part for a second and think about this. This part. This part. This the part that I'm afraid of. A man knowing and kill me, or a man not knowing and kill me. And when I say a man knowing, he know what he did after we had sex, that all of a sudden now he feels disgusted. He's angry with me because he feels as though I used my body to lure him in because society got in his head, and now he's standing in front of me wanting to kill me off of something society done planted in his head. Or I had the surgery. I'm living my life. Hell, I stopped telling people I was trans. And someone finds out and come and kill me. It is a very thin line when you're in transition. It is a very thin line when dealing with a man whose mind is not always stable and strong. The one thing I want my two spirit sisters to understand, men have been killing women for years. You're now stepping into womanhood. And to step into womanhood, that means you're going down, you're not going up. You have to go down a level. Now the bad part about our life is now we see all the hell cis women have been going through for years. For years they've been murdered. For years they've been killed. And now we're sitting in that spot now. We're taking a turn. And now we're being murdered. And we're being killed. We're like, oh, killing us because of gender. No, they've been killing women for years. Any excuse. This girl was only 25 years old. We need to ask her, sis, what happened? He discovered she was born a male. How would he know? How would he know? After having sex, if the reports are accurate, it states after having sex, he cooked body parts of Nina in her own home oven, confessing to murder, dismemberment, and cooking trans woman. He did it after discovering she was trans. He cooked her. What happened? The medic was on that night out with Nina before being invited up to her flat, but as the pair had sex. They had sex. See, that's the part I'm talking about. They had it already. And see, that's the part, that middle part right there, that's the gray area. So after you had sex, you could have been about to rob her. And she fought him back. And then all of a sudden, here comes this excuse. Then he realized she was trans and had undergone gender reassignment, gender affirming surgery. He immediately strangled her in her bed and then had to hide the body. Now remember, keyword here, already had sex. You already didn't have the sex. He immediately strangled her in her bed, then tried to hide the body and dismember her corpse. To me, my personal opinion, this was a murder. This was a murder. You know exactly what he was doing. Police detained and questioned Mihail after Nina's family reported her missing. Now, let me ask y'all something. How many people you know murdered somebody and then take out time? I'm gonna get me some salt. He's using salt to get rid of the smell. How many people you know try to murder you, go in your house and put salt down after murdering you?
And my audience, I want you to respond to that on our Spotify and Apple accounts. Again, to my sister Nina, Surgutskaya, born 1994 and resting on since April 10th of 2019. We remember you yesterday, today, tomorrow, forever, and always. Thank you, my audience, so much for tuning in to Season 4, Episode 6 of A Hateful Homicide. My name is Mallory Jenna Robinson, your host. You can follow us on Instagram at A Hateful Homicide. You can follow me at MalloryJenna90. Please take a listen and look at our website at ahatefulhomicide.net. And please use the hashtags True Crime, Trans Awareness, Say Her Name, and Russia. Again, my sister Nina, rest on. And please, my audience, enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you, and bye-bye.